Hello guys, rainy day here. I'm working on a flat in a sheltered housing association. Not too bad actually, doing the full flat before the lady moves in. Quiet, isn't it, work wise? Anyway, wanted to have a chat. I thought I'd restart the chats. Been a busy time. I've had a cold, lots going on. So I wanted to have a chat about doing work for landlords. Quite a while ago I stopped doing work for letting agencies because it's just a lot of drama, and if you ring round the letting agencies, they're always looking for people, if you notice, which just sort of says something. It's just stressful. They want a percentage of the work you carry out. Always seems to go wrong. Something happens always. So but I do a little bit of sort of end of tenancy work. Carpet cleaning side is a big one. I often get tenants ring up and say we've had to clean our carpets because we've had animals or what have you, and I always crack on and do that. But I'm very careful with with who the letting agencies are, because even that can be drama. And I had one. It's during the lockdown, so kind of 2020. They were moving. They bought a house, whatever. Went and cleaned their carpets, cleaned them fine. Letting agency, because they'd got in their own people, i.e. me, and I think I was probably about £60 cheaper than the other quote they'd had. Obviously, majority of that extra would have been going to the letting agency. The letting agency kicked off, said it wasn't done properly, said the other company had taken a video of dirt coming out, so I asked for the video, and it was just pathetic drama, to be honest with you. And it is just pathetic with some of these letting agencies, and I've just given up dealing with them, rightly or wrongly. I've got all sorts of stories I could tell you about asbestos and people wanting to cut corners and all sorts, but this particular one, so went to a quote. I'd done some work for a family member of this guy, this landlord. Asked me to go and do a quote, so I said yeah, sure, no problem. Booked it in. It said, booked in the quote, he said, oh yeah, the tenant will be there still, but he's happy to let you in. I said great. I said I'll just have a little walk round, know what I'm quoting for, basically full breed deck. That was it, quite happy. Turned up to find, obviously the tenant's dad opens the door and he didn't look happy. I said, is everything okay? He said, yeah, the landlord's here. And the landlord had turned up before the tenant had moved out and was actually doing the garden already, and sort of the wife was actually helping pack stuff in the kitchen and commencing a clean. Very odd. Anyway, so turned up, had a look, and basically the house had been 8 years old. It was 8 years old from new, hadn't been painted at all, so that's just kind of cheapy contract mat on. Walked around, said actually this isn't in a bad condition considering it's been 8 years since it was new and you've done nothing to it. That's actually not bad. Wife then said about there was some flaky paint in the bathroom. Said, oh, that's bad, down to bad extraction. They're not ventilating. I was like, well, where are they going to ventilate? There's no window. That you've got an extraction fan which obviously goes on automatically when you switch on the light. And actually, for 8 years, the amount of flaking was minimal, to be honest. I said, but you know, you need it. She said, I'll just put a cheap paint on. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that because you've said you're selling. It's first time buyer property. I have quite a few morals and I don't really want to stitch up the next people. I will put on a proper mid sheen. Actually, I put on a vinyl silk in the end on that ceiling. I said I'll put on a proper paint so that it doesn't so when new people move in, they've got a chance of not having a property that's going to go badly wrong. Little bit of mould due to condensation in the property, nothing major. I mean, I'm not kidding you, nothing major. So anyway, backwards and forwards, and I was sick, and it was just before I'd done the trip to Slovakia. So I sort of sent him the quote off, and it was asking for a deposit, and it was asking for, I think, and then it was obviously just like a payment on completion. I can't remember what the deposit was. I think there was a booking deposit, and I think that. Anyway, so I was just coming up to going away, and he paid the deposit. Said, could he have a receipt? So I said, yeah, no problem. So that was it. then it started, and he then contacted me again, said I need the receipt for the letting agents. I was like, well, why? And he said, oh, well, they've gone around taking pictures. They say the tenant's to blame for some of the stuff on the walls. I'm like, well, they're not. It was a young couple. I think they had 2 children and then a baby. Nothing. And the landlord said, oh, well, they've moved because they've got a baby. Bear that in mind. So anyway, went to Slovakia. Wasn't particularly stressed there, but the guy was just quite incessant, sending messages. Said, I'm abroad at the moment. Anything we need to deal with needs to be dealt with when I come home. You are in the diary, however, we'll deal with that when I come home, whatever it was. And he just got crazy. So I sent him a message from Slovakia, and just said, right, look, I've told you I'm abroad, can't deal with this, I'm back on such and such a date, I'll deal with it then, but actually, do you know what, I've got your deposit, send me your bank details, I'll send that deposit back, and I can do that from here. I said, however, that will be this evening, once I've got I think problem with Wi-Fi or something anyway. So I said, but that will be this evening and you get your money back, not a problem at all. Went quiet, never heard a word. A week later, God no, probably a couple of weeks later, I got back, and he'd sort of sent another one through, and I thought, well, I had a scenario once with a landlord job where I'd done the work, sent the invoice, and they'd sent the invoice to the tenant as proof that they'd done damage to the work, so the tenant had then contacted me in a fairly threatening manner, and I'd just sort of contacted the landlord and said, look, don't want this, I'm doing the work for you, not for the tenant. So they've got no right to contact me. Plus they contacted me on a personal social media account, not the business one, which was a little bit sinister, I must admit. A lot of landlords are quite desperate for money. So Julie got to this point where I said, look, got back from Slovakia, said, right, I'll return your deposit, and he was like, oh no, I want you to do the job, just want this done, I want to get out of here. I was like, right, okay. And they were very penny pinching, very penny pinching. I said, oh, you know, we could do a full carpet clean here, and they were like, no, we're going to do it with the vax. And little did they know I was going to say, well, that would have actually been free of charge because we've done so much work on my property, but yeah. So that was that, really. So they were kind of shooting themselves in the foot the whole time. One property landlords, guy had a brand new car, and lived in a very well-to-do property. During this point, up to this point, he'd also been asking for my home address. Obviously, we've discussed that before in my chats, haven't we, about not giving out your home address. And I was like, well, why do you need my home address? You've got the business address. You know, that's why I have the mailbox business address. I just wouldn't give out my home address. I was like, this is just weird. So there was all these red flags, and I thought, well, the job's easy enough. But I said, look, we're out. And he got quite desperate, was ringing me up, and I said, right. I said, I'll have a chat about it. And so I kind of thought, and I'd come back from Slovakia, and work had gone a bit, not quiet, but I just could have done with some work. So I was kind of, I said, right. I said, we can go ahead, but you are going to have to pay the whole amount up front, because I thought the way this guy's coming across, and he was coming across, some of the things he'd said to me at quote stage even were like, I've done painting before, so I can always come and give you a hand. So in the quote I put, this is the price, and if you come and give us a hand, it's not going to be any cheaper for you, and in fact you'll probably hinder the job. And it turned out in later conversation that he'd only actually ever painted his own home. Really, you're talking, yeah. It's a very typical baby boomer landlord, really. One property. So I got chatting to the neighbour at the property. That's it, her little boy had come out to go to nursery, and I was getting a bit upset and wanted to talk to the man, i.e. me. So I kind of, you know, being a dad myself, I kind of get it. And he reminded me a bit of my own son when he was that age, so I kind of just had a little chat and waved him off from the car park. Bye, have a good day at nursery, as he was waving. Quite bizarre, but saves a toddler having a meltdown. So anyway, got chatting to another time, and got chatting, and it turned out this landlord had actually evicted the tenants, and he told me different, so I wouldn't have taken the job on. I don't do evictions at all. I wouldn't have done it, and I said, I'm really sorry. And then I said, well, she said, oh, he's trying to charge them for all sorts. I said, well, just so you know, I said, they were trying that with the painting, and if they try and back charge on any way, I've made the landlord pay everything up front, and I've made him write me a separate email saying that none of my works are being back charged to the tenant. I said, because I don't feel, A, I don't feel that they need to be, and B, I don't really want anyone sort of turning up and getting silly and sort of saying I've said this or that, which I haven't. I'm just literally, to do your job is this. So yeah, kind of went ahead and did the job. Was it stressful? Guy kind of turned up most days, seemed alright, had a chat a couple of times. But he came out with a lot of rubbish about equipment he'd used and a sheepskin roller because it held more paint and using that on ceilings and just all sorts. I thought, you're a cowboy chap, you're an actual cowboy. And he'd had to have all this cleaning done, but I was like, but I said, I'm quite straight. I said, look, I said, if I was that tenant, I said, I wouldn't have let you in when I came to do that quote. I said, you were already in cleaning. Therefore, they felt they had to go. I said, you never know, they might have been spending the rest of the day cleaning if you hadn't been there. You know, I said that's just me being honest. And sort of really, it sort of ended fine. Got the job done. He was happy. You know, he made another request for another invoice at the end for his tax or something for the accountant. So worded it very carefully. Got in and got out. I was like, to be fair, was it going to go wrong? No. Once you've got the money up front, you're okay, because you just get the job done and go. And if they make it difficult, you can just say, well, I can't finish the job. Obviously, I want to finish the job because that's what I do. But yeah, it was a little bit distasteful, some of this landlord's stuff. And a lot of you right now, work is getting quieter. It is. There's no doubt in my mind. Be careful with single landlords hiring you directly. Be careful. They're broke. They're penny pinching mainly, and it's just difficult to work for them. And they're going to want the tenant to pay for everything, and they're quite entitled. Letting agencies, it's the same. You're going to turn up. They're going to want you to do a job. They're going to try and sort of diddle you occasionally. They're going to try and kind of just get money out of you. They're going to want a percentage of your work, and they're just very difficult to deal with. And just tenants in general, it can be very disorganised. A lot of young people invariably work for letting agencies, and just I've got some horror stories that you wouldn't believe. And I had one agent who I did quite a bit of work for over the years. I mean, he was quite a mainstay customer for a while. Management changed a bit. I think it was a buyout. This guy had sold his business, and this other younger guy had taken over. And he just, I think the last straw, he had a landlord who just kept complaining, and it got quite mildly stressful with some of the jobs and the people he was hiring to do some of the other works. So I said, I don't want anything more to do with you, mate. I'm quite upfront, really. Got silly, and he just clearly didn't care about his tenants, and quite controlling. He had heating controls and just all sorts. And I think the final straw was there was a roof, and he wanted a handyman job done, which is something I do. I do a little bit of handyman works, and he wanted this ivy taken off a roof. I said, well, I think that's asbestos. And he kind of said, look, it's an asbestos roof. I said, I know it from looking at it. Oh, it's not. I was like, well, I'll tell you what, go and get it checked. If it's not asbestos, I will pay for that check. If it is, you can deal with it. A month later, rang up, so I haven't heard from you for a while, and what's happening with that roof? Oh, it did turn out to be asbestos, but he doesn't want to hire you again, secretary. And I'd known this secretary admin lady for years. I said, okay, that's fair enough. I said, you can appreciate it. I said, I don't want to be messing with asbestos. She said, it's costing thousands to deal with. I was like, well, that's not my fault. It's an asbestos roof, and you tried to get me to remove the ivy in the roof for kind of under a normal job as though it was a corrugated iron. I said, he's in the wrong. He said, yeah, I know. So yeah, didn't hear from that one again. I had a couple of others where they would just, you'd turn up to get keys weren't ready, jobs weren't ready, and it just got stressful, or you're just constantly chasing money off them. And I think another one I had a carpet clean for a guy. Through a rental agency. That would have been before the lockdown. I think we kind of do before and after lockdown now, don't we? So I had this carpet clean. Did it. A month later, I hadn't had the money, so I just rung up to say, look, where's the money, please? He said, oh well, the carpet wasn't that good. I've got a problem paying the bill, to be fair. So I was like, it's not a problem. I said, but I finished that job 4 weeks ago. So someone's turning up there and messing around. So I finished that job 4 weeks ago. I said, so you've obviously seen it, but you've not decided. You've decided not to ring me up to tell me there's a problem. That invoice is overdue. If I don't receive it within 7 days, I'll simply just take it to small claims court, and you know, I've got it like that. So again, game playing. He's obviously back charged the tenant. I can't remember what the carpet clean was. Probably about 150, shall we say. So he's obviously back charged it to the tenant. The tenant's paid him 150, or the landlord has, and he's looking to pocket that because he's got another carpet cleaner on board. That's your letting agent for you. That's what they do. I know another letting agent who has a baseball bat actually in his office, a metallic one, behind his desk, and you think, don't really want to deal with you anymore. If you've got why do you need a baseball bat in your office? What have you done to need a weapon in your office like that? Yeah, obviously you're not a baseball player, are you? Another one I know threatens, rents out to police officers, but then obviously gets them to do little favours for him, or they lose their house. Known that one before, and one in one extreme I heard, and it's actually genuine. Actually, was threatening tenants with a gun, and you think, yeah, so you need work. Definitely, we all need work. Don't get me wrong. We need to be paying the bills. We need to be working. But if you're doing letting agency work, you need to go in with your eyes wide open. You need to be checking reviews of these letting agents and seeing what their behaviour is like, and seeing what they're actually truly doing. Another letting agent I had, did a couple of jobs for them over the years. Nothing huge. Wasn't getting a large amount from them, but I don't think they have a throughput. I think they get tenants in and they stay. But had one job that just went through no fault of their own, just got worse and worse. Someone had plastered over wallpaper and had to be removed, and just got very stressful. And I was dealing with the tenant in the end directly, which was a lot easier. Felt very sorry for them, but and I kept the costs down. I think it went 650 over the initial quote, but that's because of this wall that was just awful. And we had to get plaster in. It had to be stripped off. If I remember, John, you can imagine, Stanley actually was helping me strip plaster off from wallpaper, so it's just a blade. Yeah, great fun. So yeah, but then I'd done a job for them. They rang me up earlier this year, so I'd done a job for them probably 6-7 years ago, and they were starting talking about enamel in a bath. So again, it was an ex-rental. Now it was being fully redecorated, sold, and it obviously sold to a landlord, and it then went out for re-rental by someone else. And they said the bath enamel has all flaked off. So I'm like, but we don't paint baths with enamel. She said, well, you must have done. I was like, well, no. I said I kind of vaguely remember the job. I said I'd actually have to look back through records. But I said certainly, I said from memory, ceilings, walls, woodwork, not going to be painting sanitary ware, and my immediate reaction to a bath would have been, no, replace the bath. And I said, are you sure it's not limescale? And my grandmother had a bath years that we thought was enamel coming off. It was actually built up of limescale over the years. I said, because I certainly haven't enamelled it. I said, if someone's enamelled it, it's either the landlord has done it after we have, because I'd have spotted it, or it's just been it was limescale, or the tenant's done it for some reason. Okay, never heard another word. Never heard another word from them since either. I'll play it fair. So yeah, just be really careful with letting agents. Don't know if I've got any other. Sorry, my cold is still bad. I don't think I've got any other horror stories as such. But it's just I seem to remember. Yeah, that's it. And another one. And they were like cheap suits and sort of quite snidey people. I remember another one. This office. In this office, this guy had sat there and said, I'd just come out of the RAF. So obviously giving the impression he'd been an RAF officer or in the RAF. And it turned out he was in the RAF reserves and just stopped being a reserve. So anyway, sort of bit of a. So I kept up, did a fair bit of work for that agency over the years, and in the end it got to a point with the toilet where there was a problem with the toilet. I told them there was a problem with the toilet. I think it was a mark or something. And he was like, oh no, the landlord will want a new toilet. I was like, well, there you go then. Don't know what to say. Do you want to get a plumber in? What? Never heard another word. Then they withheld the money. But obviously, with any business, when you're self-employed, it's essential to keep good records. So I keep every email, every communication, and all communications are always by email. However well I get on with somebody or a business. So I had all the emails and just sort of said that, and then so I rang up and said, look, I said, try to negotiate the situation with this guy. So I rang up and I said, I'm going to have to take this to small claims court. It's too much money for you not to pay. Well, the landlord's put it in dispute. I said, no problem. I said, that's fine. We'll go through to small claims. You instructed me, therefore you've got to pay. I tell you what, shortly, it was sort of during that 2008 recession, but they're the same now. And so Julie went to small claims court, filled it all out. But what this guy did, he was also then pretending to be the district judge, going, oh well. So I put that in there as well. I said, look, the last conversation, I couldn't engage with him further because he was pretending to be the district judge and sort of making up these little scenarios. My God, that went in. Obviously his managing director or whatever then got the paperwork and obviously just went up the wall and was like, I had no idea this was going on. Why didn't you ring me? I was like, well, because I didn't know how. But I'll pay you. I was like, okay, no problem. If you pay me, I can withdraw the claim. Paid the invoice. I said, we still haven't paid. I said, the claims go through. He's like, why? I said, well, because it's £80 claim fee. I said, which I put onto the claim as well. Oh, I'm going to take it out as wages. Up to you, mate. I want my £80. Julia got it. And then I think his wife had gone mad, and they were quite a well-to-do firm. And in the end, he said, oh, I'd love to meet for a beer with you, etc, etc. I was like, well, I'm really busy right now. Can't do it now, etc, etc. And he became quite a notorious letting agent for playing games. So another little horror story for you, really. And just generally, I think that whole industry can be quite dodgy, but some of you may be absolutely you really need the work, and that's great. But just be aware and have your eyes wide open to what you're going to be dealing with. You know, because they are they're a breed apart from the rest of society, some of these people. And obviously landlords themselves are going to start running out of money and getting desperate for money because of all the changes. So again, are they worth getting yourselves exposed to? A few horror stories, a few things how I've dealt with it. It's gone on into a 22-minute video, but I think that would help you if you're short of work, you're thinking about approaching letting agencies and doing landlord work. Gives you a little bit to think about and about what could happen to you. I know it's a long video, most people aren't going to watch it this long, but if you do, that's well worth, just some of those stories are well worth bearing in mind when you're dealing with people, because it's all going to happen. And then also you've got like a lot of some of your competitors will get funny and so on. So yeah, but good luck if you're doing landlord and tenant work and letting agency work. Good luck. Keep your eyes wide open. Watch your bases. Don't let any of them build up too big a bill, because it's just not on really. And if they say, well, we're taking it out of the rent that's paid next month, make sure that is genuine and true. But yeah, just be so careful, guys. All right. Anyway, take care, and hopefully this video helps somebody. Bye.